Dawn at Blue Ridge Farm always brought with it the promise of a new blessed day. On that Sunday morning, the first golden rays of sunlight gently kissed the Blue Ridge Mountains, painting the sky in orange hues that reflected in the crystal-clear waters of the creek that cut through the property. Helen woke up before the rooster crowed, as she always did, but this time with a special smile on her lips. It was the big day of Grandmother Constance's celebration. "Anthony, wake up, my love. Today is our matriarch's day," she whispered, gently, shaking her husband, who was still sleeping deeply beside her. Anthony Miller opened his eyes slowly, his face marked by years of hard work in the fields, but illuminated by a serenity that only good men could carry. At 52, he still maintained the strength of a bull and the heart of a child when it came to family. 80 years for the old warrior, he murmured, stretching his arms and smiling. Who would have thought I'd live to see my mother reach this blessed age? Outside, little Luke was already running barefoot through the pastures, his laughter echoing through the fields like celestial music. The 7-year-old boy had the brightest eyes anyone had ever seen, inherited from his mother and his father's stubborn determination. That morning, he wore a blue checkered shirt and jeans that Helen had lovingly ironed the night before. "Storm! Storm, come here, my friend!" shouted the boy, running toward the stable where the brown horse waited, neighing softly as if understanding every word. The connection between Luke and Storm had always impressed everyone at Blue Ridge Farm. The horse, which had arrived at the farm as a colt 5 years ago, had never shown the same affection for anyone else. It was as if the two shared a secret language, an understanding that went beyond words. "Today's going to be the most special day, Storm," said Luke, caressing the silky mane of the animal. "Great-Grandma Constance will be so happy when she sees the whole family together, and you'll meet my cousins from Charleston who have never been here." The horse snorted softly as if agreeing, and tilted his head to receive more affection. His brown eyes seemed to hold ancient secrets, a wisdom that contrasted with his youth. In the main house, the hustle and bustle had already begun. Helen commanded the kitchen with the efficiency of a general, preparing treats that would delight anyone: cornbread, pecan pralines, peanut brittle, sweet corn cake, and the family's famous chicken stew, whose recipe had been guarded like treasure for 3 generations. "Mom, can I help?" asked Luke, appearing in the kitchen with rosy cheeks from running. "Of course, my love. Go to the orchard and pick the best peaches for dessert," replied Helen, kissing the sweaty forehead of her youngest son. Anthony's older children, John, 28, Mark, 25, and Anna, 22, had arrived the previous day with their respective families. The house, which normally housed only 4 people, now buzzed with 12 adults and 5 children. Around 10 in the morning, the first guests began to arrive. Neighbors from distant properties, friends and companions, people whom Grandmother Constance had helped throughout 8 decades of life. Each brought a dish, a memory, a story to share. Jack, the loyal foreman who had worked at Blue Ridge Farm for more than 20 years, organized the horses of the visitors and helped set up tables under the shade of 100-year-old peach trees. A man of few words but keen observation, he noticed something strange in Storm's behavior. "Mr. Anthony," he called, approaching his boss who was talking with his brothers-in-law. "Luke's horse is acting strange today. He's agitated, always looking toward the mountains, neighing for no reason." Anthony looked toward the stable and saw Storm walking in circles, his ears alert, as if hearing something that no one else could perceive. "Must be the commotion of the party," replied Anthony, not giving it much importance. "Animals also sense when there's different movement." At 11:30, Grandmother Constance made her triumphant entrance. Supported by a carved wooden cane, but still with the proud bearing of a queen, she wore her most beautiful floral dress and the pearl necklace she had received from her late husband on their wedding day. "My children, my grandchildren, my blessed family," she exclaimed, her eyes moist with emotion. 80 years of life, and God still allows me to be here with you. What joy." Luke ran to hug his great-grandmother, who lifted him off the ground with surprising strength for her age. "My dear grandson, how you've grown. You're almost my height now," she joked, making everyone laugh. The celebration flowed perfectly. Ben's accordion, a neighbor and great friend of the family, entertained the guests with folk music and country tunes. Children played tag among the trees, while adults savored the delicacies prepared by Helen and her daughters-in-law. But as noon approached, a subtle change began to happen. The clouds, which in the morning were just small white cotton balls in the blue, sky began to cluster and darken. The wind, previously a gentle breeze, gained strength and brought with it a different smell, loaded with moisture and mystery. Storm became even more restless. His neighs began to sound almost desperate, and he started pacing from one side of the pasture to the other, always looking in the direction of the highest mountains of the Blue Ridge. It was then that it happened. Amid the laughter and animated conversations at the height of the party's joy, someone noticed that Luke was no longer among the children playing near the porch. "Luke, Luke, where are you, my son?" Helen's desperate cry cut through the festive air like a sharp blade, instantly silencing all conversations and making all those present turn to her. Anna, the youngest daughter, was the first to approach her mother. "Mom, what happened? Where's Luke?" "He was here just a moment ago playing with his cousins. I went to get more dessert from the kitchen, and when I came back—" Helen's voice trembled, her hands clutching her apron as if it were a protective amulet. "He was gone. Simply gone." Anthony dropped the cup of soda he was holding and ran to his wife. "Calm down, Helen. He must have gone to see the sheep, or he's playing hide-and-seek. You know how curious he is." "Dad, we've already looked in the obvious places," said John, the eldest son, with growing concern in his voice. "We called for him in the stable, in the vegetable garden, in the orchard. Nothing." In a few minutes, the entire party transformed into a search operation. The men divided into groups, each responsible for an area of the property. The women stayed close to the house, taking care of the other children and keeping the pots on the stove, hoping that the boy would appear hungry, as he always did. Grandmother Constance, even at 80, refused to sit. Supported by her cane, she walked around the porch, her eyes alert to any suspicious movement. "This boy has something special," she murmured to herself, a distant memory shining in her eyes. "I always knew he was different from the others." Mark, who worked as a firefighter in Charleston, took charge of the search with the experience of someone who had participated in many rescues. "Jack, you know every inch of this land. Where could, say, 7-year-old boy have gone?" The foreman scratched his head thoughtfully. "Mr. Mark, Luke knows the farm like the palm of his hand, but he's smart. He wouldn't go beyond the limits you taught him. Unless—" "Unless what?" asked Anthony, approaching the two. "Unless he followed Storm. That horse was strange today, very agitated. And now that I think about it, I haven't seen him in the pasture for a while." The three men ran to the stable. The door was open, swinging with the wind that intensified. Inside, all the other horses were in their places, except Storm. "My God," whispered Anthony. They left together. It was Jack who had the idea to look for footprints. His eyes, trained by life in the countryside, soon found what they were looking for. Near the pasture gate, in the soil still soft from the dawn rain, there they were, the unmistakable marks of Storm's hooves, and beside them, small footprints from a child's sneakers. "Look here," called Jack, kneeling to better examine the tracks. The footprints go side by side. The boy wasn't riding the horse, they were walking together. Mark knelt beside the foreman. "Where do they lead?" Jack pointed to the trail that snaked toward the highest mountains of the Blue Ridge. "That way, to Far Ridge." A heavy silence hung over the three men. Far Ridge was known for its wild beauty, but also for its dangers: steep trails, treacherous cliffs, deep caves, and dense vegetation that could confuse even the most experienced. "Not possible," said Anthony. His voice choked. "Luke would never go there. He knows it's forbidden." "Mr. Anthony," Jack spoke gently, "the boy may not have gone of his own will. Maybe Storm decided to go and Luke followed." At that moment, as if nature wanted to conspire against them, the sky darkened even more. Heavy, laden clouds began to cover the sun, and the first thunders echoed through the mountains like war drums. "It's going to rain hard," observed Mark, looking at the clouds. "We need to organize quickly before the storm arrives." Helen, who had approached silently, heard the conversation and felt her legs weaken. Anna supported her, preventing her from falling. My boy is up there, in those dangerous mountains," she whispered, tears finally flowing. "Helen, my love, listen," said Anthony, holding his wife's face between his hands. "Our son is smart and brave, and he's not alone. Storm is with him. That horse would protect Luke with his own life." Jack had already begun to select the most resistant horses for the search. "I'll take Thunder and Lightning. Mr. John, are you coming with?" "Fiaisum, of course, and I'm coming too," said Mark, determined. "I'm going with you," declared Anthony. "No, Dad," John put his hand on his father's shoulder. "You stay here taking care of the family. If Luke returns on his own, you need to be here." It was a difficult decision, but necessary. Meanwhile, the neighbors who had come for the party organized themselves to help. Ben put away his accordion and grabbed his most powerful flashlight. Rose, Helen's close friend, took over the kitchen so that Luke's mother could concentrate only on praying. The first drops of rain began to fall when the search party left. There were 6 men mounted on the best horses in the region, equipped with flashlights, ropes, and provisions. Each carried in his chest the hope of finding the boy safe and sound. Grandmother Constance, who had remained strangely calm during all the commotion, approached Helen and whispered something in her ear that no one else could hear. What the matriarch said made Helen's eyes widen in surprise, and for the first time since the disappearance, a flicker of hope shone in her face. The rain began to fall heavily while the search party rode along the steep trail that led to Far Ridge. Jack led the way, his experienced eyes trying to decipher the tracks that the water was beginning to erase. The wind howled among the rocks, creating ghostly sounds that echoed through the mountains. "Jack, can you still see the footprints?" shouted John over the noise of the storm, protecting his face with his soaked hat. "Some are still visible up ahead," replied the foreman, pointing to an area protected by a large rock. "But we'll have to hurry before the rain erases everything." Mark, accustomed to emergency situations, kept calm and carefully observed the terrain. "Where does this trail lead, Jack?" "To the highest parts of the ridge. There are some rock formations. Up there, caves, lookouts, but there are also dangerous places, cliffs where one false step could be fatal." The foreman's words made everyone's hearts tighten. Thinking of Luke, a boy of only 7 in that hostile environment during a storm, was heartbreaking. Meanwhile, at the farm, Helen paced back and forth on the porch, stopping only to look toward the mountains. With each echo of thunder, she closed her eyes and moved her lips in silent prayer. "Helen, my daughter," said Grandmother Constance, approaching with her cane, "I need to tell you something about your boy." "What do you know, Grandmother Constance?" The matriarch looked around, making sure they were alone. "Luke is not an ordinary child. Since he was born, I've noticed something special about him. A connection with nature that goes beyond normal." Helen stopped walking and faced her mother-in-law. "What do you mean by that?" "Have you noticed how animals behave around him? How he seems to understand what they feel? And Storm, that horse has a protection over the boy that is not of this world. Grandmother Constance, you're scaring me." "No, my daughter. I'm trying to give you hope." The old lady held Helen's hands with surprising firmness. "My grandmother, God rest her soul, used to tell stories about special people, people who were born with gifts. Luke has that gift, and if I'm right, Storm took him to a safe place." Back in the mountains, the search party had found something that renewed their hopes. Stuck on a low branch of a twisted tree was a small piece of blue checkered fabric. "It's from Luke's shirt," said John, immediately recognizing the fabric. "He passed through here." "And look," Jack pointed to marks in the mud. "The footprints continue. They're following the main trail." Ben, who had known these lands for more than 50 years, seemed worried. "Boys, this trail will reach a fork up ahead. One path goes down to the valley, the other up to the ancient caves." "Ancient caves?" asked Mark. "They're very old formations. Some say they have paintings from the Indians who lived here hundreds of years ago. My grandfather told strange stories about that place." "What kind of stories?" John wanted to know. Ben hesitated before answering. "Stories about people who disappeared and then came back different, wiser, as if they had learned secrets that no one else knew." The rain continued relentlessly, but the group couldn't stop. With each step, The trail became more dangerous. Loose rocks rolled down the mountain, and in some places they needed to dismount and carefully guide the horses. It was when they reached the fork that Jack made a crucial discovery. "Look here," he said, kneeling near a puddle of water. "The footprints go up toward the caves." "Are you sure?" asked John. "Absolutely. And there's one more strange thing. See the boy's footprints. They don't show signs of hurry or desperation. It's as if he were walking normally, without fear." This observation left everyone thoughtful. How could a 7-year-old boy be so calm in such a situation? As they climbed, the vegetation became denser and the path more difficult. Vines hung from the trees like green curtains, and the sound of the rain mixed with strange noises from the forest. After almost 2 hours of difficult walking, they sighted an imposing rock formation. It was a stone wall that rose like a natural cathedral, with several openings that led to the interior of the mountain. "These are the caves," announced Ben, with a mixture of admiration and fear in his voice. It was then that they heard it. A sound that made everyone stop immediately. A strong and clear neigh echoing through the rocks like a call. It was unmistakably Storm. "He's here," whispered John, his heart beating rapidly. Jack pointed to one of the cave openings. "The sound came from there, but we need to be careful. These caves can be dangerous, with deep wells and passages that get lost in the dark." Even with the rain diminishing a bit, visibility was still low. They lit their flashlights and torches, preparing to enter what could be both salvation and the greatest danger they had ever faced. "Luke!" shouted John, his voice echoing off the rocky walls. "Luke, are you there?" The response they received left them speechless. It was not the boy's voice they heard, but an even more impressive sound, Storm neighing in response as if calling them into the cave. And then, weak but clearly audible, came to them the sound they most wanted to hear, the happy and unmistakable laughter of Luke coming from the depths of the cave. With hearts racing, the 6 men approached the entrance of the cave. The light from the flashlights danced on the rocky walls, revealing geological formations that seemed to have been sculpted by divine hands. The air inside the cave was surprisingly warm and dry, contrasting with the storm outside. "Luke!" John shouted again, his voice echoing through the depths. "Dad's here, son." "Uncle John." The boy's crystal-clear voice sounded close, much closer than they expected. "I'm here, come see this amazing thing." Following the voice, the group walked through a natural corridor that opened into a large and impressive chamber. And it was there that they witnessed one of the most extraordinary scenes of their lives. Luke was sitting calmly beside Storm, who seemed completely relaxed. Around them, on the walls of the cave, were rock paintings that glowed with a soft and mysterious luminosity. But the most impressive thing wasn't the ancient paintings. It was what was happening at the moment. A family of deer had taken refuge in the cave, and the animals were calmly close to the boy and the horse, as if they were all old friends. 2 fawns slept leaning against Luke's legs, while an owl perched on the boy's shoulder, who delicately caressed its feathers. "My God," whispered Jack, hardly believing what he saw. "I've never seen anything like this in my entire life." Luke looked at them with eyes shining with joy. "Uncle John, Jack, I'm so glad you came. Wait until you see what Storm showed me." John approached slowly, trying not to frighten the animals. "Luke, son, your mother is desperate. Why did you leave like that without warning?" "But I didn't leave, Uncle John," replied the boy, with the naturalness that only children possess. "Storm called me. He said I needed to see something very important." Mark frowned. "Luke, horses don't talk, son." The boy laughed, that infectious laugh that always spread to everyone. "Not with words, Uncle Mark, but I understand what he wants to say. I always have." Ben, who had remained silent until then, approached the paintings on the walls. "My God!" "In heaven," he murmured, "these paintings, and they're glowing." It was true, the rock paintings emitted a soft golden light, naturally illuminating the cave. There were drawings of people, animals, and symbols that seemed to tell an ancient story. "Storm brought me here when the rain started," explained Luke. "He knew I would get wet and catch a cold. But when we got here, something very special happened." "What happened, son?" asked John, sitting beside his nephew. The paintings started to glow, and I could see everything they were telling. "It's the story of our family, Uncle John, the story of our land." Luke pointed to one of the paintings. "Look here. This is the story of a boy who lived a long time ago, a very long time. He also had a special horse, and they protected the land and animals from bad people who wanted to do harm." The men looked at each other, not knowing what to think. It was impossible to explain with logic, but it was happening before their eyes. "And there's more," continued Luke, carefully standing up so as not to wake the fawns. "Storm showed me that our farm is in danger. There are people who want to take our land from the family." "What do you mean, Luke?" asked Jack, now paying full attention to the boy's words. "I don't know exactly, Jack, but I saw in the paintings that outsiders are coming with papers, wanting our land, and that only someone from the family can protect the farm, someone who can understand the signs." Mark approached the paintings, trying to understand the symbols. "Luke, these paintings are very old. How can they talk about things that haven't happened yet?" "I don't know, Uncle Mark. I just know that Storm brought me here because I need to learn to protect our family, just like the boy in the story." It was then that Ben made a discovery that would change everything. Examining one of the paintings more carefully, he noticed something that gave him goosebumps. "Boys, come see this," he called with a trembling voice. Everyone approached the wall, where the old man was pointing. There, in a painting that seemed more recent than the others, was drawn a scene that left them open-mouthed. A boy and a horse, exactly like Luke and Storm, protecting a land with mountains and a creek, the exact description of Blue Ridge Farm. "This isn't possible," whispered John. "Jack," said Luke, approaching the foreman, "Storm told me that you also have the gift, that you always knew I was different." Jack knelt at the boy's height. "Luke, my son, I always knew you were special, but I never imagined—" "You don't need to be afraid," said the boy, smiling. "Storm explained everything to me. Our family has chosen to protect this land, and now that I know that, I can help." The owl on Luke's shoulder hooted softly, as if agreeing with his words. The deer got up and came even closer, as if wanting to demonstrate their trust in the boy. "Uncle John," said Luke, "can we go home now? Mom must be worried, and I need to tell her and Dad about what I discovered." John hugged his nephew, still trying to process everything he had seen. "Of course, son, let's go home." As they prepared to leave the cave, Luke turned to the animals and said something that none of them understood, but which made all the animals move in an organized way. "To protect themselves from the rain." "How does he do that?" asked Mark to Jack. The foreman shook his head, still impressed. "I don't know, Mr. Mark, but one thing I know. This boy will change the destiny of our family." The rain had decreased to a gentle drizzle when the group returned to Blue Ridge Farm. Luke rode calmly with John while Storm followed freely beside them, like a faithful dog. The other men came in silence, still processing everything they had witnessed in the cave. "My son! My boy!" Helen ran from the porch as soon as she spotted the group approaching, her tears of relief mixed with the drizzle, and she hugged Luke, with such force that she almost pulled him off the horse. "Mom, I'm fine," said the boy, returning the loving hug. "Storm took care of me the whole time." Anthony came running, followed by the entire family and the guests who had remained at the farm during the search. The relief on the father's face was indescribable. "Thank God, my son. Thank God you're okay," he said, kissing the boy's forehead repeatedly. Grandmother Constance approached, supported by her cane, but her eyes shining with a special intensity. "And so, my little grandson, what did you see up there?" The great-grandmother's question made everyone stop and look at her with surprise. How did she know that Luke had seen something? "Great-grandma Constance," said Luke, getting down from the horse and running to hug her. "You always knew, didn't you?" "Knew what, my love?" "That I'm different. That I can understand animals and see things that others don't see." A murmur ran through the group of adults. Helen looked at her mother-in-law with an expression of someone beginning to understand many things. "Let's go inside," said Anthony, still confused. "We need to talk about all this calmly." The family gathered in the large living room, while neighbors and friends discreetly said goodbye, understanding that this was an intimate moment. Only Jack remained at Anthony's request. "Now, Luke," said the father, sitting in a chair in front of his son, "tell us exactly what happened." The boy, with the naturalness that only children possess to tell extraordinary things, narrated the entire experience in the cave. He talked about the paintings that glowed, about the animals that sought him out for protection, and especially about the vision he had of the farm's future. "Dad, there are people who will come here wanting our land," said Luke, with unusual seriousness for his age. "I saw it in the cave. Paintings. They'll say they have documents, but they're liars." John, who had remained silent until then, spoke up. "Luke, I saw the paintings too. They really glowed and really showed things impossible to explain." "That's true, Mr. Anthony," confirmed Jack. "All of us saw it. The boy has a gift that can't be denied." Grandmother Constance sighed deeply and rose from the armchair. "It's time to tell the complete truth." Everyone turned to the matriarch, awaiting her words. "This land has a much older and more special history than you imagine," she began. "My great-grandfather didn't buy this farm. He was chosen to protect it." "What do you mean, Mom?" asked Anthony. "More than 100 years ago, when he arrived here, he found a very old Indian from the tribe that lived in these mountains. That Indian was waiting for him." Grandmother Constance walked to an old dresser and removed a wooden box that no one in the family had ever seen. The Indian said that the land would choose its own protective family, and that in each generation someone would be born with the gift of communicating with nature. All these years, that someone was me. The silence in the room was total. Everyone processed the matriarch's revelation. "You, Grandma?" asked Anna, incredulous. "Yes, my daughter. For 80 years I protected this land. I drove away people who wanted to do harm, saved injured animals, and always knew when some danger was approaching." She opened the box and removed a necklace made of precious stones from the region, with an engraved symbol that was identical to those in the cave paintings. "But now I'm old, and my time is coming to an end. That's why the land chose Luke to be the next protector." Luke approached his great-grandmother, his eyes shining with emotion. "That's why Storm understands me, isn't it, great-grandma?" "Yes, my grandson. Storm is a special horse, just as was my great-grandfather's horse, and my own horse when I was young. They are born with the same gift, to be companions to the protectors." Helen, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "Grandmother Constance, why did you never tell us this before?" "Because I needed to be sure, and I only became sure today when Luke was called by the cave paintings." Anthony stood up and began to walk around the room, trying to organize his thoughts. "Mum, assuming all this is true, why did Luke talk about people who will want our land?" "Because they're already coming," replied Grandmother Constance, with sadness in her voice. "A few weeks ago I received a visit from men from the big city. They said our deed had problems, that documents were missing, that we could lose the farm." "And why didn't you tell us?" asked John, concerned. "Because I knew that Luke would be called at the right time, and that he would help us find the solution." Luke approached his grandfather and held his hand. "Dad, the cave paintings showed where the true documents of our land are, documents that no one can contest." "Where, my son?" "In the cave itself. There's a secret chamber that can only be opened by someone from the family. Great-Grandma Constance knows how to do it." All eyes turned to the matriarch, who smiled for the first time since she began telling the story. "Yes, I know. And tomorrow, God willing, we will all go together to get those documents. Because now Luke no longer needs to carry this burden alone. He has the whole family to support him." The boy ran to hug his great-grandmother, and at that moment Storm appeared at the living room window, neighing softly, as if agreeing with everything that had been said. Dawn brought a clear sky and a fresh breeze that seemed to carry promises of renewal. Grandmother Constance woke before everyone, as she always did, but this time with an energy she hadn't felt in years. Today would be the day to officially pass the baton of land protection to her great-grandson. "Luke," she called softly, entering the boy's room. "It's time, my grandson." The boy opened his eyes immediately, as if already waiting for the call. Great-grandma, I dreamed about the cave all night. The paintings showed me amazing things. What did you see? I saw our great-great-grandfather arriving here for the first time. I saw you when you were a girl riding a white horse protecting the farm from a flood. And I also saw— Luke hesitated. Saw what, my love? I saw that the men who want our land will arrive today. Grandmother Constance nodded gravely. Then we have no time to lose. Let's wake the family. In an hour, the entire Miller family was gathered on the porch, ready for the expedition to the cave. Anthony had insisted that everyone go together, including Helen, who had initially been reluctant to let Luke go out again. If my son really has this gift, she had said, then I want to be there to support him. Jack saddled the gentlest horses for the women, while John and Mark prepared the necessary provisions and equipment. Anna would stay at the farm with the young children, along with 2 of the daughters-in-law, to receive unwanted visitors in case they arrived, before the family's return. If men come asking about the land deed, instructed Anthony, tell them we'll be back in the afternoon and don't sign anything without our presence. The ride to Far Ridge was very different from the previous days. The sun shone brightly. Birds sang cheerfully and Storm trotted in front of the group like an experienced guide. Luke rode beside his great-grandmother, talking quietly about things that no one else could completely hear. "Grandmother Constance," asked Helen, bringing her horse closer, "how did you manage to keep this secret for so long?" "It wasn't easy, my daughter. There were times when I almost told everything to Anthony, especially when he was a child and showed a special sensitivity with animals." "I really did," confirmed Anthony, who was riding right behind. "I remember that I could calm any wild animal just by talking to it. But the complete gift only manifests in one person per generation," explained Grandmother Constance, "and always at the right time when the land needs protection." When they reached the cave, Luke dismounted and went directly to Storm. The Iowa boy leaned his forehead against the horses, and they stayed like that for a few seconds as if conversing in silence. "He's telling me that we need to hurry," said Luke. "The men have already left the city and are coming here." "How can Storm know this?" asked John, still skeptical despite everything he had seen. "The animals in this region are all connected," explained Grandmother Constance. "They communicate among themselves in ways we barely understand. A bird saw the men leaving the city and spread the news." Inside the cave, the rock paintings began to glow again with the presence of Luke and Grandmother Constance. This time, however, the glow was even more intense, as if responding to the presence of the 2 protectors together. "Now, my grandson, you need to find the key symbol," said Grandmother Constance, pointing to the walls. Luke walked slowly along, the paintings gently passing his hand over the drawings. Suddenly he stopped in front of a painting that showed a hand touching a stone with the same symbol as his great-grandmother's necklace. "It's here," he said, placing his palm exactly over the drawing. Immediately the stone began to move, revealing a secret compartment behind the wall. Inside it, protected from moisture by a treated animal hide, was a set of old documents and a small metal box. Grandmother Constance picked up the documents with trembling hands. "These are the true titles to our land," she said, carefully opening. "The yellowed papers, documents signed by President Lincoln himself, recognizing our family's perpetual right to these lands." "Why were they hidden here?" asked Helen. "Because my great-grandfather knew that one day someone would try to contest our right to the land. He hid the original documents and registered only copies at the county office." Luke opened the metal box and found more surprises. Old gold coins, jewels, and a handwritten letter. "Great-grandma, there's a letter here with your name." Grandmother Constance took the letter with emotion. "It's from my great-grandfather. He left instructions for me, knowing that one day I would need to protect the farm." She read in silence, tears streaming down her face. Then she looked at Luke with pride. "He says he also had visions and saw that one day a very special child would be born in the family, a child who would not only protect the land, but would help other families in the region protect their properties, too." "Other families?" asked Anthony. "Yes, because what is happening to us is happening to several families in the Blue Ridge. Men from the big city are trying to take the lands using fake documents or claiming irregularities." Luke approached the wall where there were more paintings. "Great-grandma, look at this," he said, pointing to drawings that no one had noticed before. The paintings showed several families united, protecting their lands together. And in the Ihuabe center of all of them, a boy and a horse leading the protection. "It's my destiny, isn't it?" asked Luke, with impressive maturity for his age. "It's your destiny to help, my grandson. But you won't be alone. You'll have the whole family, and all the other families you help." At that moment, Storm appeared at the entrance of the cave, neighing urgently. "They've arrived," said Luke. "We need to go back now." The family carefully stored the documents and treasures and prepared to ride back to the farm. This time, however, they weren't just going to protect their own land. They were going to initiate a fight that would change the destiny of the entire Blue Ridge region. "Luke," said Grandmother Constance as they mounted the horses, "are you ready to be the protector you were born to be?" The boy looked at Storm, then at his family and finally at the mountains that stretched to the horizon. "I'm ready, Great-Grandma. We're ready." When the Miller family arrived at Blue Ridge Farm, they found 3 men in suits waiting on the porch, along with Anna, who seemed visibly nervous. 2 black cars were parked near the house, contrasting with the rustic simplicity of the place. "Good afternoon," said the tallest man, who appeared to be the leader of the group. He had grey hair combed back and wore gold-rimmed glasses. "I'm Dr. Mendoza, attorney. These are my colleagues, Dr. Smith and Dr. Rogers. We've come to discuss the situation regarding the deed to this property." Anthony dismounted his horse and approached the men, maintaining his composure. "I'm Anthony Miller, owner of this land. How can I help you?" "Well, Mr. Miller, we've discovered some serious irregularities in your property documents," said Dr. Mendoza, opening a black folder. "It seems the original deed was never properly registered, and there are doubts about the legitimacy of ownership of this land." Grandmother Constance, still mounted on her horse, observed the men with penetrating eyes. At 80 years old, she had developed a special ability to perceive people's intentions. "What kind of irregularities?" asked John, approaching his father. "Missing. Document signatures that cannot be verified. Records that don't match the official files," replied Dr. Smith, a chubby man with a mustache. "Unfortunately, you may have to leave this property." "Leave?" Helen quickly dismounted her horse. "This land has belonged to our family for more than 100 years. "We understand the emotional attachment, ma'am," said Dr. Rogers, a younger man who seemed uncomfortable with the situation. "But the law is the law. However, our clients are willing to make a generous offer for the property." Luke, who had remained quiet until then, dismounted his horse and approached the men. Storm followed him, walking freely but always close to the boy. "Are your clients the same ones who are trying to take land from other families in the region?" asked Luke, with a seriousness that surprised the lawyers. Dr. Mendoza frowned. "Excuse me, young man, but this is not a conversation for children." "Luke, come here," called Grandmother Constance, dismounting her horse with Jack's help. "Let the adults talk." But the boy didn't move. Instead, he looked directly into Dr. Mendoza's eyes. "You're lying. Our documents are in order." "What an impertinent child," muttered Dr. Smith. "Mr. Miller, you should educate your son better." "He's not my son. He's my grandson," corrected Anthony. "And he's right. Our documents are perfectly in order." Dr. Mendoza smiled condescendingly. "Mr. Miller, I personally examined the records at the county office. There are serious problems with the documentation." It was then that Grandmother Constance stepped forward, holding the leather folder she had brought from the cave. "Perhaps you haven't examined the correct documents, Doctor." She opened the folder and removed the old papers, still in perfect condition. "These are the original titles to our land, signed by President Lincoln himself in 1867. The 3 lawyers looked at each other, clearly surprised. Dr. Mendoza extended his hand. "May I see those documents?" "You may see, but you may not touch," said Grandmother Constance firmly. "They are very valuable historical documents." Dr. Mendoza put on his glasses and examined the papers from a distance. Even trying to maintain his composure, it was visible that he was nervous. "These documents, where were they kept?" he asked. "They've always been in the family," replied Anthony. "Kept in a safe place." "But "But this isn't possible," muttered Dr. Smith. "We checked all the archives." "You checked the public archives," corrected John. "These are the originals, which never left the family." Luke moved even closer to the lawyers. "You knew these documents existed, didn't you?" "Boy, what are you talking about?" Dr. Rogers tried to sound irritated, but his voice betrayed nervousness. "You work for a company that wants to build a resort here in the Blue Ridge," said Luke with conviction. "And for that you need to remove all the families from their lands." The silence that followed was tense. The three lawyers looked at each other again, this time with clear concern. "These are just a child's suppositions," said Dr. Mendoza, but his voice had lost its initial confidence. "They're not suppositions," said Grandmother Constance. "We know exactly who you are and who you work for." She removed another document from the folder. "This is a list with the names of all the families you've tried to evict in the last 6 months, and also the name of the company that hired you." Dr. Smith took a step back. "How did you get this information?" "That doesn't matter," replied Anthony. "What matters is that we're not leaving our land, and we're going to warn all the other families about your scheme." Storm, who until then had remained calm, began to get agitated. The horse walked toward the lawyers' cars and began to stamp his hooves on the ground, neighing loudly. "Control that animal," shouted Dr. Rogers, clearly afraid. "Storm doesn't like dishonest people," said Luke, caressing the horse's neck to calm him. "He senses when someone has bad intentions." Other animals on the farm began to behave strangely. The dogs appeared. Barking, the chickens became agitated, and even the cattle in the pasture began to moo loudly. "What the hell is happening here?" asked Dr. Smith, looking around with growing nervousness. "The animals are protecting the land," said Luke simply. "They know you shouldn't be here." Dr. Mendoza tried to regain his composure. "Well, regardless of these strange events, we will contest these documents in court. Our clients have sufficient resources to prolong this process for years." "They won't have that chance," said a voice behind them. Everyone turned and saw a man in uniform approaching. It was the sheriff of the region, accompanied by 2 deputies. "Sheriff Carter," exclaimed Anthony, "what brings you here?" "We received a report about document falsification and attempted misappropriation of land," said the sheriff, looking seriously at the 3 lawyers. "Gentlemen, you'll have to accompany us to give statements." "This is absurd," protested Dr. Mendoza. "We are respectable attorneys." "Perhaps," said the sheriff, "but that will be determined in the investigation. Several families in the region have made similar complaints against you." As the officers led the 3 men to the patrol cars, Luke approached the sheriff. "Thank you for coming, Sheriff." "No need to thank me, boy. We received the report by phone this morning. An elderly lady told us everything about the scheme." Everyone looked at Grandmother Constance, who smiled mysteriously. "How did you manage to call when we don't even have a phone here at the farm?" asked Anna. "There are many ways to communicate when you know the secrets of this land," replied the matriarch, winking at Luke. As the police cars drove away, Storm completely calmed down and all the other animals returned to normal. Peace had returned to Blue Ridge Farm, but everyone knew that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. 3 weeks passed since the confrontation with the corrupt lawyers. Blue Ridge Farm had returned to its peaceful routine, but everyone knew that something fundamental had changed. Luke was no longer just a child playing in the pastures. He had become the official protector of the land, with all the responsibilities that entailed. On this special morning, representatives from 12 families from the Blue Ridge had gathered at the farm. All had faced similar attempts at expulsion from their lands, and all had been saved by the intervention of the Miller family and the information that Luke had obtained through his visions. "My friends," said Anthony, addressing the group gathered, "under the shade of the century-old peach trees, today is a very special day, not only because we defeated those who wanted to steal our lands, but because we discovered something even more important." Grandmother Constance, supported by her cane, but with eyes shining with pride, approached the center of the group. "The time has come to tell you the whole truth about this region." Luke was sitting on the ground next to Storm, caressing the horse's neck. In the last few weeks, his connection with animals had intensified even more. Now he could not only understand them, but also communicate with animals from distant properties, creating a network of information that covered the entire Blue Ridge. "You wondered how we managed to discover the lawyer's scheme with such precision?" asked Grandmother Constance. "How we knew exactly which families were being threatened and when it would happen?" Murmurs ran through the group. It was true that the speed and precision of the information had been impressive. "The answer lies in the rock paintings of Far Ridge," continued the matriarch. "Paintings that not only tell the story of the past, but also reveal visions of the future." Mr. Johnson, neighbor of the farm to the north, spoke up. "Grandmother Constance, with all due respect, that sounds like a legend." "I thought so too," said Mark, Anthony's son, "until I saw it with my own eyes." Luke stood up and walked to the center of the group. "Mr. Johnson, do you remember when your cow Daisy disappeared last month?" "I remember. I looked for her for 3 days. And I told you exactly where she was, didn't I?" "Yes, you did, boy. She was in a cave I didn't even know existed." "How do you think I knew?" Mr. Johnson scratched his head thoughtfully. "I always thought you had seen her by chance." "It wasn't by chance. Storm told me she was lost, and the cave paintings showed me where to find her." Mrs. Wilson from a farm to the east spoke up. "Luke, was it you who warned about the storm that destroyed the old bridge?" "Yes, Mrs. Wilson. I saw it in the paintings 3 days before it happened." An impressed silence took over the group. Even those who had benefited from Luke's information still hadn't fully understood the origin of his knowledge. Grandmother Constance resumed speaking. "My friends, this region is much more special than we imagine. Centuries ago, it was chosen by the spirits of nature to be protected. And in each generation, someone is born with the gift of communicating with these spirits. And now that someone is Luke," said Anthony with evident pride in his voice. "Not just Luke," corrected Grandmother Constance, smiling mysteriously. Everyone looked at her with curiosity. "Last night I had a very special vision," said the matriarch, "and I discovered that the gift is not limited to just one person per generation. When the need is great, it can manifest in more than one." She walked to where Carmen, Mr. Johnson's daughter, was standing, a 9-year-old girl who had demonstrated a special ability to find water springs. "Carmen, you've always known where hidden water was, isn't that true?" The girl nodded shyly. "Yes, Grandmother Constance, I hear the water running under the ground." "And you, Peter?" Grandmother Constance addressed Mrs. Wilson's son, a 10-year-old boy. "You've always been able to predict when it was going to rain, even when the sky was clear." "It's true," confirmed Peter. "I feel it on my skin when rain is coming." "And little Annie," she pointed to a 6-year-old girl. "You talk to the birds, don't you?" Annie smiled and nodded. "They tell me many things, Grandma Constance." Amazement took hold of all those present. There were at least 5 children in the region who demonstrated special gifts. "My God," whispered Mrs. Wilson. "So it's not just Luke?" "No," replied Grandmother Constance. "The land has chosen several children to protect it, each with a different gift, but all connected." Luke approached the other children. "I already knew," he said, smiling. "In my visions I saw you, saw all of us working together to protect our families and our land." Storm approached the group of children, and to everyone's surprise, each pet present also approached. Dogs, cats, and even a parrot that had accompanied one of the families gathered around the special children. "They know," said Luke. "The animals have always known we were different." Mr. Johnson, still processing the information, asked, "But what does this mean for us?" "It means our lands are protected in a way we never imagined," replied Anthony. "It means our children have gifts that can help us live in harmony with nature. And it means," added Grandmother Constance, "that we can create a cooperative between all our families. We can work together, use the children's gifts to improve our harvests, find water, predict the weather, and protect each other." The idea excited everyone. For the first time in decades, the families of the region had a perspective of prosperity based on cooperation and respect for nature. "But there's one thing more important than all this," said Luke, walking to the center of the group. "In my latest visions, I saw that our mission is not just to protect our lands." "What is our mission, my grandson?" asked Grandmother Constance. "Our mission is to teach other people to live in harmony with nature, People from the big city who have lost that connection. People who think they can dominate the land instead of respecting it. Luke pointed to the surrounding mountains. The cave paintings showed me that one day many people will come here, not to take our land, but to learn from us. To learn how to live without destroying, how to grow without harming. A learning center, murmured Mark, his eyes shining with the possibility. Exactly, Uncle Mark. A place where people can come to learn about sustainable agriculture, about communicating with animals, about how to predict climate changes using nature's signs. Luke's vision excited everyone. There was the perfect solution. Instead of selling their lands to big companies, they would create something of their own, something that would respect both their traditions and their responsibility to the environment. And the best of all, said Grandmother Constance with tears of joy in her eyes, is that this keeps our families united on their lands, passing their knowledge to the next generations. Storm neighed happily as if approving the plan. The other children with special gifts approached Luke, forming a circle, and all the animals positioned themselves around them. Then it's decided, said Anthony. We'll create the Blue Ridge Harmony Center. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in golden and orange hues, Luke looked at Storm and smiled. His journey as protector of the land was just beginning, but he knew he wasn't alone. He had his family, his new special friendships, and most importantly, he had the certainty that he was fulfilling the destiny for which he was born. "Thank you, Storm," he whispered to the horse. "Thank you for showing me who I really am." The teamwork. Horse tilted his head and gently touched the boy's face in a demonstration of affection that forever sealed the partnership between the protector and his guardian. And so, at Blue Ridge Farm, was born not just a new hope for the families of the Blue Ridge, but a new model of life that would show the world that it is possible to live in perfect harmony with nature, respecting the special